Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to MECSC Talks. MECSC Talks is a monthly seminar series focused on bringing the tech community together to discuss the role of technology in society. We aim to bring together developers, researchers, and industry experts to discuss exciting topics at the forefront of technological innovation. These talks are hosted by MECSC, a world-class graduate program that provides industry partners with direct access to applied research talent. I'm excited to introduce today's guest speaker, Helen Kontozopoulos. Helen is the co-founder and chief tech evangelist of Odeia, an AI-powered commercial insight software as a service platform for pharma companies. Odeia's mission is to reduce patients' time to therapy by facilitating meaningful interactions with healthcare providers through human-centric software powered by AI. Her talk today will focus on how her team discovered and developed a startup in the pharmaceutical industry with an end goal of having a large positive impact on patient journeys. Helen, off to you.
Hi, thank you, everyone, and thank you, Daniel. Thank you to everyone who's trickling in, and it's nice to see some familiar faces. I just wanted to, first I'll share my screen to make sure everything's running fine. I think while I'm presenting today, I really want to put in some moments of teaching and advice along the way for the students who are in the audience, and of course, just the overall audience who might be interested in startups and wanting to work in thinking about maybe commercializing their research. So I'm really happy to be here. So this is where I started. I started in 2013 at the University of Toronto as a TA for the Business of Software course, which was created by Professor Ron Becker, an entrepreneur himself. And he also found that he needed to educate computer science students about business. Since 2013, I had co-founded a startup incubator at the Department of Computer Science. It was called DISL, Department of Computer Science Innovation Lab. Yes, it's a mouthful. And that was there to support, it was a lab there to support students and researchers to commercialize their ideas and create startups, and just to overall build out a great ecosystem for computer science and entrepreneurship and the wider ecosystem. But I still teach. I get that question a lot. I still teach product development and design and entrepreneurship at the Department of Computer and Mathematical Sciences up at Scarborough campus. And I also guest lecture, of course, at U of T and at different universities around Canada and in the States. So I can't get away from teaching. I just love it. But my day job is pretty much always Odeia. So Odeia, everyone always asks us, they always think it's an acronym. And it's funny going into presentations and sometimes people say ODIAA. Well, it's an odyssey, Odeia. So it's the Greek word that means the things that someone carries with them, a merchant who carries something with them. And it's part of the journey. And because this came out of the founders that we had, which was me, Philip Poulides, Professor Pericles Andrizos from the Department of Computer Science and iSchool at the University of Toronto, and Gal Bernard in 2018. Again, research out of the University of Toronto with the work that Perry and Gal were working on, which was process mining, customer journey mapping, and machine learning. So we were, I think, the same as a lot of other researchers and other university kind of based startups, where what you have is kind of like a problem, trying to find a solution because you're working on a problem, you're trying to understand, a really good problem you're trying to solve at the university, you're researching, and then you're saying, can this be applied? Can this be applied at a commercial level? Can you create a solution for someone to pay for? And this is where we came in, where it was me and Philip, and we're really looking into how to really create something from the research that Perry and Gal had started. It was also a very hard-coded prototype based on a research project. So it was showcasing a vision of what we think we were thinking about. We did get a great response from the community and from the ecosystem here in Canada, in Toronto. And we raised a small round where we, from Canadian venture and from angel investors, from Panache Ventures, Stand Up Ventures, BDC Capital, the Women in Tech Fund, Inovia Capital, and Mars IF, which now is TAP. So that has changed. I have to update that slide. We also were part of, at the universities, like I mentioned that I co-founded a lab, one of the incubators on campus. Well, another accelerator on campus was UTest and Creative Destruction Lab CDL, which is out of Rockman. UTest is our incubator for researchers. It is there to support IP transfer out of the university and is there to support you. So they were very supportive. So for me, it's like, it was great to work on the other side of as a startup founder. Well, before I was supporting startup founders. So I've seen both sides. This is the ecosystem that I keep on mentioning, and I have updated this slide. So whereas Mars IF was Mars IF, now it's Toronto Innovation. Oh no, Mars IF is Graphite Ventures. Sorry, I messed it up. There's lots of changes that have happened in the last few years, but a lot of great things that have come up out of the ecosystem is investors and angels who are there to support you as you're coming up with your first prototype and your first investing bodies that can support you as the early years that we were at ODEA. And so again, entrepreneurship, which is UFD's overall umbrella, and Ontario Centre for Excellence, which is now OCI. Told you about all those changes in names. I hope I didn't miss any. We also went into larger accelerator programs that were global, like Dentsu Aegis and Plug and Play, and Creative Destruction Lab, which is very large. So that was very good on supporting us. Building our team. So this is the learning moment. So we had two academic founders. We had someone who has created startups in the past with Philip, who has sold startups in the past. And you have someone like me who kind of bridges both sides on tech and business. And what happens when you first start your startup, you're thinking, what is the relationship I'm going to have with my co-founders? What does not the 6 month look like, but the few years ahead of you? And a lot of that is creating an agreement and saying, how do we work at a business level? So a founders agreement are the roles and responsibilities you're going to have with your founders and your co-founders, and also who you will want to fill in for positions that you might not be able to. So it's a great exercise that we had where, not only does it say to you, there's a major business relationship we're going to have. What are we going to do? Who's going to do what? Of course, as a founder, you feel like you're wearing multiple hats. So you're not only doing one thing, but you're doing multiple things. And of course, a lot of these agreements mean they're vesting over 4 years. And when we use words like vesting, it means that, over the next 4 years, you don't straight away get all your equity as a founder. Your first year, I founded this company, I own all of it kind of thing. It's equally distributed between the four of us. And of course, you don't get everything at the beginning. You have to vest it over 4 years. That keeps you committed to your company and also the commitment for everyone to be there. I did mention that you start having these conversations, and the question is, what are our strengths as a founder group? What are our weaknesses? Where do we need to fill our gaps? Like, where are the gaps in this leadership team? And also, what do we see in the future? By really, for us, it was like 4 months, 6 months, a year. But eventually you get to this point where you're thinking a year to 2 years out of how many people you need to hire and where they could be. This is our team when I always laugh at this picture because it's quite funny. It took us about a year to hire our first employees. So it's not quick. There were a lot of gaps and we were trying to fill them the best we could. It took us, first employees from, hiring our tech group and our product. And I do want to do a shout out. He is sleeping usually. And Joe is an MSCA student program. He was out of the program. He was one of our first intern. And he is now our lead solution architect. So, he's still with us. So I really, let's just say the MSCAC program is close to my heart because of that. After that 1 year to raise and start building up that momentum, it was based on a potential problem solution fit that we had found. And then that's how we built out our technical and product team. This is our team now. Fast forward to this is 2022 when we did that offsite retreat. And we're a bigger team. We're about 57. I don't know, today with our HR stand up, it was a little bit more people now that are coming on board every week and every month. But you can see that culture is very important to us. So getting together and hanging out and having fun is very important. So it's been very exciting. Let's just say I didn't think I would do so much HR. Recently, last year around this time, we secured a Series A, and that this was not only funding from the Canadian ecosystem. Now, because we were branching out and doing sales in the States, and we needed more kind of, I think, a different perspective on sales and funding advice, and I would say like who you need to bring onto the board and all these types of questions. We got some Boston funding. So our investors came from Boston. That's what I'm trying to say. With the Boston funding, Boston, Jersey, and Philadelphia are I'll eventually give it away, but they're hubs of the pharmaceutical industry, and that's what we're in. I'll get there of what we work on, but this is kind of where we're at right now. But we have paying customers now, so that was our goal last year, and we hit our goal this year. So the teaching part. Usually most people think, as you saw, you come up with an idea, there's some research you've been thinking about. You kind of have a prototype you've been working on, you do a pilot with an industry partner, you build the solution from the pilot and get all this good stuff. And then you get funding. That's the road I thought. I think my naivete before I was a startup founder was that's what you do. Well, it wasn't like that. It was kind of more like this. It was like continuous pitching your idea of what you think. You're pitching your pilots. You might have multiple pilots and your ups and downs, and it's like pilot. And we knew very early that we did not want to die by 1,000 pilots, because eventually you want to turn pilots into customers. So it's a very business transaction next to say, after a certain time, you will find value in this. But it's hard to say that. It's hard to do that. So it's kind of this up and down and negotiations. And I think a lot of times it's more being comfortable in the time that it takes to do these projects, the time to maneuver around multiple stakeholders, the time to get the nuances and understand what people are really trying to get and what they want from you. The many times when you're like, we haven't heard from them for a month, what's going on? But they're running their world as well. They've got their own businesses they have to run, and large companies. They have other projects and pilots they're running too. And sometimes what happens is you underestimate other people's ability to ignore you. Like you're like, wow, they just kind of like, I'll get to them. But you kind of have to be very sensitive to people's time, and also be very willing to be patient, but also push at the same time. So it's a very fine balance of what I have found when it comes to this really hard part. And sometimes I thought this was the hardest part of building a startup, but it's sometimes the sweetest times too. So you're searching for, because between me and Philip, we have multiple connections with multiple industries, and me working at the university, supporting researchers and other students to work on multiple different types of industries. We had a lot of experience. We had a lot of connections, so we can start thinking about pilots. So we were searching for a problem. We were searching for industries we can fall in, because we do customer journey mapping. That's what we do. Well, customers are everywhere in every industry, and everyone is excited about what you do. So they're always like, look at me, look at me. I can I need to know where my customer is going in the future. You can predict that. And so we started from like advertising, banking, hospitals, I wrote the list, security, insurance, and even manufacturing light bulbs, smart light bulbs. So at one point, you get overwhelmed and you're taking your team, you only have limited resources, limited time. And this is where you start saying, you've got to be very quick to learn to say no quite early and to just stop. And what's great about that is you got to kind of go fast to go slow. So it's stopping to think, is this the best way we're using our resources, using our people, using our time, understanding if these are the directions we should be going. And it's great having someone like my co-founder, Philip, who has gone through this multiple times and has had this experience, but also then going out and asking people and having a good community of advisors, not only investors and angel investors, but also people in your ecosystem that have seen other startups like yours go through. So you're still searching for a problem. You've got this great technology you're building out, and you're thinking, when will I get a next data set? Trust me, that's always the case. I think for most startups is, when will I get more data? Well, it's about the right data, as we all know. So why pharma sales? I think I got that question a lot in the last 2 years, because again, I listed so many other different different areas we could have gone into. We were really being courted by advertising. Insurance loved us. They go, this is a great opportunity, for us. But I think it's sometimes when there's a really good opportunity where it's hard, it's a little bit outdated, and there's time for change to happen. And you're part of a movement and you can feel a pull. And that's what's exciting. Because if you're not feeling a pull, you're feeling like, why are we even doing this? And I think when it came to the pharmaceutical industry, there was a pull. And I'll tell you how we got to pharma. So one of the pilot projects we came from was a connection that I had from the University of Toronto. I was from the faculty of medicine, and I'm walking down Mars, right? I'm walking down the hallway for some meeting. I had just resigned from DISL in 2018, and I bump into Peter Lewis. Peter Lewis is an professor emeritus of biochemistry at the Faculty of Medicine. And he also worked, I want to make sure, he was the vice president of research innovation when I worked with him at DISL. So again, same ecosystem person. I bump into Peter and I say, hey, first thing he goes, are you leaving? And I'm like, no, I'm still here. I'm a U of T startup. I'm here to create a startup, but I'm just across the street on the second floor or the third floor, so you can see me, I'll be there. He said, what are you working on? I explained the research. I said, we do process mining. We do customer journey mapping using process mining, machine learning, and we're trying to figure out where customers go with multiple data sets. We kind of want to understand more of their journey. He goes, I know, I just had a meeting with a pharmaceutical that is trying to do the exact same thing you're trying to solve. And I was like, that's fantastic, because we are having all these other meetings with industries. It'd be fantastic for you to connect with us. So it was like kind of perfect timing. And sometimes luck is for the prepared, or at least the ones who are willing to do anything, to do anything to make it work, right? So sometimes you just got to say, yes, let's go have the conversation. As that conversation was interesting. So, you're in this room and you're having a conversation about pharma, and we were doing research about it. And I realized, this is a journey that is a lot more complicated than I thought. I think you think the interaction you have with your doctor is just you and your doctor. You got to go, you say, look, I have, I've got a sore throat, or, I've got a little bit of a pain back here. You're having this conversation with them. I have multiple conversations with them monthly, usually, because I have elderly parents I take care of. So as a caregiver, I'm there in the front of a doctor's office many times on calls, saying, giving updates. I have to understand a lot about certain diseases. So when you think of a doctor journey, usually it's not complex. But when you start realizing the amount of interactions doctors have to have with other doctors, that they have to gather information and knowledge about new drugs, clinical trials, about clinical trials. They have to go to journals. They have to learn from sales and medical reps. They have to, I would say, talk to pharmaceutical companies, like their sales and medical reps. They have to talk to, pretty much like the pharmacist. They have to, like pharmacists and tons of other people that you would never, I guess you never see those conversations because you're not part of those conversations, right? You're kind of at the edge of the conversation because they've had these conversations and this research happening here. And it depends on, if they're just going to send you to another specialist, but they got to talk to the specialist. Hey, what did you find out? What should I know about? It's not clear. These are multiple journeys again. It's ups and downs of information coming to you. And there's a lot of gaps, right? So I think this is kind of, you only see one area, but then you realize when you start researching more, the journey that you take is a lot more complicated. And they're complex. So multiple drugs with overlapping diseases, multiple doctors, research, Google, Dr. Google. I hear that a lot. There's so much you need to know. I need to know. My parents need to know. The doctor needs to know. So as a caregiver, I took care of my father who passed about a year ago. And between his kidney diseases, prostate cancer, his therapy, prostate cancer therapy, his gout medications, I was the only central person who kept track, who understood. I had no idea about which drugs interacted with drug. Like I could only take from what I can gather, and make sure I was doing the right job. Thank goodness for pharmacists, lots of conversations that you have access to, and very picky doctors. So I realized what we really did at ODEA, I would say after a few months after the pilot, and the pilot continued and we kept on going on doing this pilot for a few months, then they just continued into a SaaS agreement. When I went to my dad's gout doctor, and the gout doctor was just like, I'm not sure if I can get this drug to you. Like, I'm not loyal to my dad. I need to call up the rep. I'm like, what are they talking about? I knew who the rep was because that's kind of what we're doing at the startup. Like, that's what we're doing at ODEA. But when you're with a personal situation and you're sitting there with your dad and you're sitting with the doctor and she's saying to you all these things, you're not thinking about business. All you're thinking is how I'm going to support this person, right? So she goes, look, I need to call them. And she gets on the phone. She's talking about the different clinical trials. She goes, oh, when did that happen? She's asking all these specific questions. And she's like, how will that interact with that other gout medication? And he's allergic to that. Sorry, we can't give that to him. And they're having these conversations before putting my dad on these medications. And I said, oh, is this new? And she goes, yeah, that's the only way I can get the information. And she goes, she was going on and on about how these clinical trials, and then she also found out how to get a discount on these drugs. As a senior, and being able to support my dad, I'm like, okay, I can, figure out how to support him on this. But there are programs, and these reps knew about it. This medical rep knew. That was the aha moment. It was the aha moment that there was this conversation happening between doctors and the pharmaceutical companies, these sales reps and medical reps, that people think doctors just know. Somehow they study all night, that they're like sitting there looking through trials. No, there's a lot of support on giving the right information to these doctors about different therapeutics, and also trying to find the right doctor, your own family doctor, trying to find the right doctor for you to get the right medication. So there's a lot of kind of journeys that are happening that we think, oh, they just give you the drug. And you're like, no, there's new things happening, but there's also old medications that are being impacted. So that was my aha moment. And it was very clear in my mind. I knew now what I was working on. And the question is, can I impact a journey? Can I support a medical rep or a sales rep to get the right doctor at the right time with the right information to the right patient? This kind of journey of support and kind of understanding where this drug is flowing and how this therapy can really help my dad or help any patient, really. So being able to not waste people's time, not waste a doctor's time. So the question is, can I impact a journey? Well, this is what a journey is usually on the side of a pharmaceutical. This is that 2019 pharmaceutical group that Peter Lewis introduced us to. This was the insights they gave us about their interactions with healthcare providers. And after a long audit, and after that, we had to go through a lot of work we had to do as a startup to get to this point where we can, work on this project and this pilot and be this business enterprise relationship that we're going to have with this company. This was the workflow. The workflow were Excel sheets. It was like this static, not like data driven, but very driven by like very old information, 6-8 months. And what this list is of doctors saying, these are the types of therapies they prescribe. Just here's a list, go call them. Just really old fashioned, like knock on the door and say, hey, can you have time to hear about this drug? Or do you need more info about this? Do you need more samples? And doctors need samples. I don't know if you've ever had any samples given to you, but I have. My mom has gotten samples and see if they work for her. Sometimes you have to work across multiple samples to see which works. So we go, wow, I love Excel sheets because that means I can automate it, but I can make it smarter, right? I can work with it as, like I tell my computer science students, it's like, it says that we can make things better and more, the power of the data behind it, to be able to make things work better for this person. And maybe a rep doesn't have to go see that doctor because they'll say, nope, I already talked to them. Or no, they don't want to be contacted. They want to be contacted in a different way. So this pharma company group loved the idea, and that's what we started working on. And then we found out one of the things that happens a lot. Everything stops in the world, usually. Everything happens where not only COVID, but also just the reality of people planning and getting things ready. So a sales rep said, oh, the world stopped. And they're like, oh no, this is pre-COVID, the world stops for us. Getting ready, taking a long time for us to get through all the planning that we have to do. And the thought of, being able to use other digital tools in the so-called digital transformation that was happening was overwhelming. So there was a lot of things that were happening in this workflow that we started finding more and more opportunities, right? Opportunities to make better, to have better understanding of these relationships and that people were having with their doctors, and then where we can step in. So there's a lot of analysis happening. And we're starting to build this out, and we're saying, would this work? Would this work? So it's a lot of interviews. I don't know how many focus groups I was working on, and how many my team on the product side were doing interviews, talking to sales reps, talking to the marketing folks, like talking over and over again, listening and understanding before we were starting to build. So there was a lot of conversations that were happening. And then this really stopped. Not only did it stop in the past, the pandemic changed everything. And it seems a little bit far away, aside that, it's still there, very in our faces still. The pandemic really changed the way people worked, because now no one could go knock on the door. You can't go talk to your doctor. It has to be a phone call. It has to be where, everything had to go virtual, right? So what happened was, not only did it stop people, it changed an industry. And that's where the big opportunity. Before, we were helping them in thinking about the processes they were going to work pre-COVID. So we were improving a pre-COVID kind of workflow. Now this is the workflow. And they were in the dark. There's no one knocking on doors. There's no one having these conversations. And so this is where I really tell my students all the time, is that you really have to have these deep conversations. So when your user does go through changes, and this was a large macroeconomic and pandemic change, this was like a complete change for their lives, you're there to understand and there to step in. So it was an opportunity for us to say, you don't need to go in. Here's a list. Here's the information we can get you, because we can draw in the same information, but even more on top. So again, preferences changed. Doctors were like, we don't even want to see anyone. So there's a big shift. And because of that shift in mindset, there was that accelerated need to do things differently, really made people think about, how good are these interactions? And can I make them better? So there was this kind of shift in thinking, and that's what gave us, again, the opportunity. There was this need, of course, just an overall trend in the industry, even pre-COVID, which was like, not only you got things separately, but you were able to come in as an omni-channel, so you could get things all at your fingertips and very kind of, you're able to grab many things and get more information. So get more channels at a unified information, seemed all the same everywhere you went. And so the doctor in the middle can get more information, but also the sales rep can give that information in multiple ways and seem like more unified in the messaging. So that was very important as well. That was a digital transformation trend that was already happening. It just accelerated it. So again, like I mentioned, a forced transformation, and there was priorities that just went to the top. So a lot of startups that you hear, projects that weren't, even machine learning projects and projects that were just kind of on the side, either were totally cut or accelerated, because there was a big opportunity to take an advantage of them and say, we need them, we really do need them. I did mention that there was a lot of gaps after. So then this is where our data and the way we brought data together was able to start filling in those gaps. The biggest comment we got was, we don't know what to do next. And so if we can step in and say, we know what to do next, we can help you with that. That's kind of what happened that really pumped us up. Like, it really got us excited, because we can show what you do next. They do it, and then they come back and they go, wow, that was great. That was fantastic. We can really showcase the value that we can give. So we were able to create this personalization around messaging, timing. Because we have this loop going, we can really showcase the data flowing. We can showcase what we're doing. And they can tell us if it was working. It was really fantastic at this stage where you're hitting 2021 and you're starting to get data coming back and showing how accurate we were. We were starting to really be able to understand journeys deeper now, because we were creating data with the data we were ingesting, we're also fine-tuning our platform. So we really fine-tuned into the pharmaceutical industry to be able to get specialized the way we ingest the data, specialize the way we think about the different types, and then also add our own types of information and thinking that data would be very, very important. We also, I will say this at this point, we're not from the pharmaceutical industry. None of my co-founders were, and none of the first engineers. So the first hires after, that first picture you see of us, in 2019, the next was pharmaceutical specialists, people who understood the user and was the user. That took us from here to there, because they were the knowledgeable ones of not only the journey, but they were also able to step in and have those conversations with us and clients. That subject matter expert really changed the way we developed the product. And really, I think that was one of the main, I would say, we're building, but I think it was one of those pivotal moments to hire people who can really say, that would work for me right now. And that feedback loop is so quick. Instead of waiting to go to a client, you bring the client in, you hire the client, and it was this kind of magical moment to have people who were who really understood the industry and who could really help. I think about them because I work with them every day, and Nil, she's amazing, right? So she's 30 years experience and in pharma, and I think this is kind of when you work with people who can say to you, I'm not from a technical background, I was a sales rep. I would have loved having this. This would have made my job so much easier. Oh, this would have been fantastic. This is dynamic. This is near real time. This is something that saves me time. I don't have to sit in my car all day. I could just pick up samples, go exactly where I need to go. This would be, these people have very strong relationships with the doctors they know, because the more they know, the more the knowledge they can give, the more the patient gets, right? The more information that can be shared. So hearing Nell talk about, her experience of what she would have loved to have this, but she's working for us, right? And it's a whole new world for her. And she was like, sometimes I don't know what you guys are talking about in the technical stand-ups, because everyone's invited to every stand-up. If they can, we have technical stand-ups. And so everyone's sharing the information. Okay. As we started going through, I'm looking at the time to make sure I'm thinking about getting into question and answer. We did a lot to get to the point where we can launch products, to launch a product, to get to the minimal viable product, but to get to a point where it's reusable, it's optimized, it's being able to be something that can be explainable and validated, and also that it could be something that someone can go in and we can, from multiple parts of the commercial team, and can go in and really learn from, and where all the user testing, all of that work that we were getting to, it's getting to something that's repeatable to get to the next client. So it's not a new pilot anymore. It's literally a SaaS platform that could be repeatable. So we reached that last year. About a year and a half. And then we launched another product on top. What's great about this is you always need to think in that moment. You always have to think, how do I repeat this? How do I be able to scale this? You're never thinking about how do I create something that could be repeatable and used over and over again, because then you can really grow. So that is a sneak peek. There's more on the website. You can always go in and look more. But these are types of the some of the things that some sales reps have said is one click and you're seeing all of your HPC's competitive information. You're seeing all this data. You're getting critical insights, and they take action. So there's a lot of where the user, we're not telling where the user needs to go. They're finding their own insights from the platform, and then they decide how they organize and where they go from. So that's been very empowering, and I love hearing that. One thing that we found from the work that we've been doing is we're taking something that used to take a few hours down to minutes. And when we talk about, really fine-tuning the future of work, this is where we come in. It's fine-tuning that person who needs to talk to another person and saying, don't interrupt them. Find them where they want to be. You want to be able to find the right person, the right channel, the right message, and get it to them. Don't waste time. Don't waste your time. Don't waste other people's time. And it's been kind of very interesting to be able to, this is kind of a very markety kind of slide, but I think in the beginning I talked about like kind of, being able to get information to people, getting information to the end user, to that patient, getting to that person who will need it. But it's really getting the information to the doctor, and getting that person who can really have that knowledge and say, okay, I know what will be right for my patient, right? I have all this information right at my fingertips. Now I can make that. Now I know a lot more always, and keeping that person up to date. So it's been a very interesting journey for me. And this is where I feel that it's been an interesting time of being able to see what is possible in this industry, but what's possible just overall as a startup and as a startup founder. I put a quote here that was not about the tech, but it was about, I would say, beyond the product. There's so much more that I've realized goes into our startup, goes into helping the customer at a customer service level. The user experience and the UI we've had to develop, the upselling, and also just the education part of what we're trying to do. All those extra services and operations that are important to develop. So sometimes when you start, when I started in 2018, you're thinking about what it means to commercialize something. And then the reality is that you're doing a lot more, or thinking a lot more as a leader on what you need to provide a service to an end user. So I hope this story helps on the idea that, like my story can show that you start here, but you never know where you might end, but it's always growing, and you got to get comfortable with you don't know where you're going, but there's a big opportunity as long as you're trying to find really hard problems. So for us, it's just the beginning, and it's something that we keep on growing, thinking about all the time. I want to put finally my last advice, and I always ask, I will say that I always ask for help and advice from multiple people, mentors and startup founders and investors. I ask people from, of course, the industry I'm working in. I keep on checking and thinking about my strengths and weaknesses. I think a lot about, where I can improve or hire someone. So I just fill the gap by hiring someone who's much better and much more qualified than I am, and get the smartest people in the room. The biggest thing for me is also don't have an ego. That is a big thing for me, and don't be mean. Sometimes we see on the news very, lots of like personalities, but the reality is, people can leave. People don't have to stay, and you don't want to be mean. You want to have a really good culture, because you've taken a long time to hire these people and get them into your organization. You want to create an awesome organization that someone stays at and gets excited about working there. You want to give them the challenge. You've done so much work, and we always want to create the best culture. And so being able to have very strong values of trust and agility and support and diversity as values. One of the biggest one is don't be mean, is be there without an ego. Be open to learn, step in, do the work that's beneath you. I think that's one of the really hardest thing for a lot of people in the audience is, no, you might have to step in and code. Sorry. Like this is the work when you don't have any money. You might have a grant. It's better you get in there and get dirty, because you'll know your platform and your product inside out. And that is very, very strong when you're building the future and building your company. Again, solve a real problem. It has to be a complex problem. And lastly, solve a big and expensive problem. Something that costs a lot of money. If it seems too easy, it's just too easy. But to me, I always think solving big problems and expensive problems is just a good challenge. And that's what I love working on. Feel free to always reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn as Helen Kontozopoulos and on social at Helen is Social. But thank you again to the MSCAC program for inviting me to talk about my journey. It's been a great experience.
Thank you very much, Helen, for the talk and for sharing your experiences and your startup story. What we'll do now is we will take questions. Questions will be read from the chat and from Zoom's Q&A function, so the audience can also raise their hands and ask any questions directly.
Oh, thank you, Barbara.
I'm going to actually jump in to get things started. So Helen, as you know, as a program, we're committed to educating the next generation of world-class innovators. As the co-founder of such a successful startup, how do you constantly keep innovating? Like, do you have any best practices or like techniques that you personally use to challenge yourself to think so innovatively?
I think it's kind of interesting because sometimes when you use the word innovation, it's kind of gets stuck on the jargon part. It's like something that is very, let's be innovative, or like it's I think I think where innovation comes from is being a very good listener. I think listening to problems continuously, I think, has been one of the listening to problems that your users having and the industry as a whole, and continuously like thinking about where they might have a future problem. I think that's been a big issue, is catching them not now that they're complaining, but saying, how big will this problem be? So it's like you're kind of thinking in a future realm. And I think that helps on the innovation thinking, is catching future trends, right? And hearing from multiple people, right? And starting to see that there's a pattern and process that is broken. So being able to see patterns is very important. And then saying, I think we can make it better. Also, your culture. There are times when different parts of our culture comes in, and of course, you're trying to hire the best, right? And your best have come from other cultures that have been very innovative, and they bring their experience. Or it's been the opposite. They say, like, well, we did it this way and it was fantastic, but I think we can do it better. And they kind of share. So those shares of background, creativity, understanding, different methodologies. And of course, that's what I mean by no ego. It's like, we want to hear better ways of making things better. So it could be innovation at a process level as an organization. It could be at a customer service level. It could be at engineering, technical, IT. It comes to many, in sales. But then there's also that level, I think, that we're growing into much more, and that's the strategic level. The question is, how do we think and take time to think about being innovative, being able to think about, again, the future, but not making an exercise of daydreaming, but really kind of saying, like, these are things that we can bring back into our thinking, like the thought, the comment from a CEO to a salesperson, so it's but take it at a strategic level, because I think at this point, you have to think of it as a strategic issue that you can then bring it down operationally. and then make change. And then that's where, hey, you'll have innovation across your organization. Hopefully that helped.
Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking about all the time now, is like, how do I take something that was very, we have a challenge, but instead of just jumping on it right away, at an operational level, and think, oh, I just have to do it. It's taking the time to stop and getting multiple perspectives from your organization. It's hard, especially when you've been a founder with, you're only 20 people and you had to do everything or something. But now that you're at a 60 level, what does 80 and 100 look like when you want to innovate across and you want to gather information, right? So that's kind of where you have to step back and be like, I don't have to answer this. Like, I don't have to do this. I can just step back and hang out and wait.
Yeah, that's great. I just have one more quick follow-up question before we'll wrap, and it's around that listening piece. And you mentioned having the ability to be able to ask deep and meaningful questions that provoke conversations, and having that ability for you to unpack that opportunity. And so my question to you is, when you're going through that customer journey and you want to, provoke a meaningful conversation, unpack opportunity, what are some of those questions, initial questions that you ask when you're trying to spark a meaningful conversation?
Oh, that's a hard question. It's a pretty good one.
No pressure. Take your time.
I think there's kind of, it's a very good question, because I think you jump in quite quickly, but there's a lot of prep with the questions before, of course, right? It's a prep. Our designers are very good at this, that they're kind of asking those kind of just, where do you take it from, like a very company-wide kind of question, where do you see your industry going? How do you see, I've heard both situations where you can start from the individual, and then, how do you see your career growing? And then you kind of build up that direction. But I think I always try to start without the pressure right on the individual. Where do you see your industry going? And then where do you see your department? And then where do you see yourself? And where do you see your colleagues? And it's kind of just waiting for them just to just keep on talking about what are they seeing, and then diving into each question into, and where did you see a problem there, and why is this an issue? And I think one of the biggest things about having my first degree in anthropology is I love having conversations, and I love thinking, how do I take the pressure off, and then start putting pressure on, but nobody realizes it. But the pressure is around trying to dive deep into, say, an employee having a rough time, and trying to find the reality of where that problem is, and saying, like, how do I find a solution for that employee? And then the same thing for the user or the stakeholder that's in the room. As technologists, a lot of times, the adoption of new tools sometimes is not the end user, is the person who feels threatened by the technology saying, well, you're getting rid of the tech I always use, or, and trying to go deeper into those conversations, I think is just really, it's very informative. You can't create a product without understanding all the stakeholder understandings, like all the issues that might come in. So those deeper conversations have been interesting and fun. But there's something you have all the time. You're having these conversations all the time, and you're kind of you get used to it. You kind of get used to kind of hitting the right buttons just to get those conversations flowing, because I don't want to go on about this, sorry, but I want to make a point here, because sometimes what someone says is not what they really think. Everything's great. Our industry is fantastic. I can't talk about that. And so Or they say, I would love that. And then our students or us were like, well, we'll totally build it. So I think there's this kind of, you got to be careful the answers you get. That's why you need multiple interviews, multiple perspectives to make sure one or two outliers or someone, or maybe there's an industry issue, I'm not talking. That's for multiple industries, right? Not, pharma has been a great industry to work in because I think we all have the same vision of helping the patient. So I think that's kind of what's driven all of us to try to create something good.